All right, welcome everybody to our July 2022 Power Hour. It is hard to believe that it is July, but we are gathered today to talk about and tackle the power question of what's the secret to motivating staff. And so all the time, people come to me, people come to Reloveution with these questions of why are my people so unmotivated? Or maybe why am I so unmotivated or demotivated? Or why don't my people act in their best interest? Why aren't they engaged? What am I doing wrong? And so today we're going to start giving you some ingredients to motivating staff. This is a precursor and a preview and a teaser for our larger workshop on motivating and influencing staff. And we actually have a version of that coming up on Friday. So if you're watching this before Friday, July 22nd, 2022, you might want to join us. This is also a topic that we can bring to your team or to your organization or to your group or ERG if this is something that is if this is a topic that is interesting to you. So again, my name is Marissa Badgley. I am the founder of Reloveution. Reloveution offers consulting, professional development, and employee engagement, leadership, and management development services. And we're working to build more compassionate worlds of work that really center human beings and the needs of human beings. For those of you who are watching this recording back, we are joined live today by 8 other extraordinary human beings from around the country, and we are thrilled to be able to bring this content to you. So today's question is, what's the secret to motivating staff? And hopefully you'll get some good answers in the next 25 minutes or so. So moving us along. So the core question when people are coming and they're worried about employee motivation or influencing people, the core question is, how do I get complex human beings to do what I want, need, or ask them to do with or without authority? For those of us who are in management positions, this is what we need to do. We need people to do what we want, to do what we need, to do what they are asked or told to do. And sometimes this is for our colleagues, or sometimes this is for our direct reports. Sometimes this is for our colleagues, so having to manage horizontally. And sometimes it's for our boss or for our supervisor. So that means managing up. And so there's a simple but not so simple answer to this. We're going to be focused on the second part of the answer today. And so when we're thinking about how do I get complex human beings to do what I want, need, or ask them to do, the simple answer is, number 1, you have to have influence. Number 2, they need to be motivated. And number 3, the system must be functional. So for this influence piece, the Rafi Park Institute has a really great definition of influence. I don't need to recreate the wheel. Influence is everything we say or don't say, do or don't do, are or are not, that modifies, affects, or changes somebody else's behaviors, thoughts, or actions, consciously or unconsciously, for good or for bad. So influence is everything that we do as leaders and as managers. And we have a lot of power. We don't always own that power. We have a lot of power. And in our workshop, our larger workshop, we go through the qualities of influence and how to build that influence up. So number 1 is you need to have influence. Number 3, because we're going to get to number 2 more deeply in a second, is that the system must be functional. And this is really, really important because all of you can do everything to be highly influential. You can create the most amazing conditions for motivation for your team. And if that system, which means your workplace or society, if that system is not functional, it's not going to necessarily work. People may still be unmotivated. People might still not do what you want them, need them, or ask them to do. So our systems have to be safe. Our systems need to be equitable. Our systems need to be efficient and purposeful and predictable. And so often, right off the bat, that is not the case. This is also a piece that many managers don't have control over. We might have control of our mini ecosystem, our team, or our department, but we might not have full influence over the entire system. So recognizing what is within our control, which is the influence and the motivation, is really, really important. And I and Reloveution are here to help you on that journey. So number 2 is that people need to be motivated. And motivation is the internal drive or need that energizes a person to do or persevere at something. Motivation can be extrinsic. So these are things like money, praise, promotion, things that are given to us as a result of being able of doing something. Extrinsic motivators are great, but they are not the be all and end all. A lot of organizations, particularly in the wake of the Great Resignation, are seeing that no matter how many extrinsic motivators we throw out, people are still unhappy and no longer accepting work conditions that no longer work for them, which is where intrinsic motivation becomes really important. So motivation can also be intrinsic. This is the desire to learn, the desire to grow or try something new just because it's interesting. And ideally, we can create teams or leadership or organizations that balance both of these things, the extrinsic and the intrinsic. But it's really important to recognize that everybody is different. And we're going to talk more about that. So complex answer, but also quite simple, right? When we need people to do things, we need to have influence, they need to be motivated, and the system must be functional. So we're going to start here with a hard truth. So all of you came to answer the question, what's the secret to motivating staff? And part of what makes this question hard is that we're starting from a false assumption that it is possible to motivate other people. And here is the hard truth. No matter how hard we try, we cannot make other people be motivated. We, as managers, as leaders, can create the conditions for motivation. We can create the conditions for motivation, but we cannot make other people be motivated. As managers, if you are a manager, creating the conditions for motivation is not an extra thing. It's not something that we check off of our to-do list. It is something that is embedded into the heart of our job descriptions. We have to figure out ways to optimize the efficiency, and effectiveness of our teams. We also need to find ways to make sure that our teams are well taken care of, that we're centering well-being, that people are appreciated and feel grounded. And we're going to talk about all of those things that create the conditions for motivation. But you can do all of those things. You can do everything that we're going to talk about in the next 15 minutes or so, and a person might still not be motivated. And that's incredibly frustrating, but it's the truth, and it's how human behavior works. So just be aware of this hard truth as we are going through today. So we are going to share, or I am going to share 7 motivation principles to start, and then 10 motivation practices that you can integrate into your practice. So let's do it. So in terms of motivation principles, to feel motivated, people need to have these 7 things, and probably a lot more than this, but this is what we're covering today. So to feel motivated, people must have their needs met at work. This includes physical needs, which in COVID times, I know we think we're out of it. We're not out of it yet. Our physical needs are our safety needs, our physical safety needs, feeling like you can stay healthy, that you have access to a safe work environment, you have a comfortable chair, you have access to food and water and lunch breaks, all of those things. People also have emotional and psychological needs that need to be met. And so when we're thinking about motivation, this is the bare minimum. We must ensure that people's basic human needs are met. Emotional needs include things like love and belonging, feeling safe, showing up with difficult emotions or hard or unpleasant emotions. That also goes along with psychological safety. But psychological safety is also about being able to make a mistake and feel like you're not going to be punished, and or that you can show up and be your most authentic self without being discriminated against or people being biased towards you. And all of these needs are important, and they form the foundation of motivation. It is really hard for people to be motivated to do anything if their baseline human needs are not being met. Number 2 on our 7 motivation principles is that in order to feel motivated, people must be held accountable. I'm going to say this like a dozen times. People must be held accountable. People must be held accountable. People must be held accountable. If people are not held accountable, if there are not consequences for bad behaviors, for lack of professionalism, for people not doing their jobs, for not showing up, people won't show up. And so often people come to Reloveution, right? The Reloveution is love in the center of the revolution. People come to us because we're so focused on love and compassion. And love and compassion are essential. But love and compassion and empathy in the absence of accountability yield to chaos. And it actually yields to people who think that you don't actually care. So if people don't think that there is a consequence, either for themselves or for a bigger outcome than themselves, what's the point? What's the point of showing up and doing this work? What's the point of going the extra mile? What's the point of doing more? And that's where the intrinsic motivation is really important, right? Because if people are only doing it because they want praise or recognition or because of the outcome, it's going to be really hard to keep them engaged and motivated in projects. So people have to be held accountable, and this is really hard. Number 3 is that people must feel like they are connected to the why, to your mission, or to the North Star of your organization or company. Very often, people, as you get down in the ranks or in the hierarchy of organizations, the why becomes less clear. It also becomes more convoluted as you go up top, right? So we've got people who are working on the ground who might be really passionate about their particular task. They're a marketer, they're a salesperson, they're a finance person, and they're excited about doing those taxes, or they're excited about doing the audit, or they're excited about creating programming for your organization. That's great. And if that passion stays self-centered, people are going to be motivated for a period of time to do their piece. But if they are attached to that larger mission or the larger North Star, and they understand how their piece fits into that, they are far more likely to be motivated to do the bigger work, far more motivated to be a part of the overarching culture rather than just a small part of an organization. Sort of similarly, in order to feel motivated, people must feel like their work is connected to their goals, both professional and personal. People need to know that they are going somewhere, that there's opportunity to grow, that whatever it is that they are doing, that the effort that they put in, this actually goes into number 6, that the effort that they put in is worth it because it means something to them in the long term. It's going to help them get a promotion, or it's going to help them build a skill that's going to let them grow their portfolio. It's going to help them build relationships, or it's going to help them create work-life balance for themselves. So as managers, we need to know what people's goals are, both their professional goals and to some extent their personal goals, and connect whatever it is we are asking them to do with those goals, which requires customization and really thinking through these things proactively. Number 5, this goes to the piece that systems have to be functional. People have to feel like systems, policies, and leaders are equitable and fair. So if people are showing up in your workplace, where people are showing up in your team, and they're doing the same amount of work, but they're being treated differently, or there are different expectations for them, or there is inherent injustice or systemic injustice in the way that those systems are set up, which intentionally or unintentionally excludes people, people disengage real quick because there's not a point. If the system's broken, it's really hard for an individual contributor to feel like there's a reason to continue to push against that broken system. So in order for motivation to, for people to feel motivated, they need to feel like it's worth it, that the leaders, that their managers have their backs, and that the system isn't going to betray them. And for some people, the system betrays them more often than not. So I just want you to think about, from your workplace perspective, how true that is for you. Number 6 in our 7 motivation principles is that in order to feel motivated, people must feel like effort and energy, whatever that they put in terms of effort and energy, have to yield positive outcomes that match or exceed the effort or energy. So this is sort of tied to the goals piece, right? If people know that they are moving towards their goals, and they're actually seeing that and feeling that, the energy and effort is worth it. But if you work until midnight and you don't get any praise or recognition for that, and there is no, perk or benefit or reason for doing that, and you feel like you've worked so hard and that the outcome doesn't match how hard you've worked, that's a very quick demotivator. So the effort and energy that we put in that matters, but it's also really important to recognize that our people are also putting in effort and energy. And we want to make sure that they know that that is recognized. They can see how that effort and energy ties into the bigger pieces. Number 7 on our 7 motivation principles is that people must be more motivated than demotivated. So this is important because when people are motivated, there are lots of reasons, there are lots of things that contribute to motivation. And if there are more reasons to be demotivated, whether they have to do with work or not, then the balance is tipped. And it doesn't matter how many things that they're motivated by. If they're more demotivated, that's going to win out. And so very often we see this in our management practice because people show up and you see that they're unmotivated or that they're demotivated. And we forget that there are things that they are motivated to do, but that's not the larger piece. So I'm going to pause there for just a second, just to remind folks who are tuning in live that the Q&A part of this is going to be at the end. So if you have questions that are on your mind right now, feel free to put those in the chat and I'll answer. I'm monitoring the chat and I can answer those as we go, but we are going to tune in for live questions in about 10 minutes or so. So just to be aware of that. But if you do have questions at the moment, feel free to put that in the chat. So moving forward. So again, in order to get people to do what we want them to do, you have to have influence. They need to be motivated, which means all of these things, and the system must be functional. But all of you showed up to actually get concrete tips and tricks. And so I'm going to give you some of those. And I'm going to give you actually 10 of those. If my screen moves forward. There we go. All right. So 10 strategies for being able to maximize motivation on your team or in your workplace or in your role or whatever it is, whatever context you are in. So number 1 is that we need to hire people who have a greater chance of being motivated in your particular setting. So a lot of times we hire people because they have a pulse or because they check a box, especially in lower hierarchy jobs. That's not enough. If there are certain things that are a part of your culture that are important for people to be motivated by, so maybe that is a perk or a benefit, or maybe it's your leadership structure or your time off policies, or the ways that people interact with each other or communicate, or maybe you go on an amazing retreat together every year, or maybe there are bonuses at the end of the year. You have a particular culture in which you try to motivate people in different ways. Some things are possible based on that culture, and some things are impossible based on that culture. During our interviews, we actually want to ask questions about what motivates people, because everybody is different. And it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's a bad candidate if they don't fit into our metrics, but we want, or into what we already are doing. But we want to be aware of that and be really honest with ourselves if we are able to put in the work and effort to create the conditions for motivation for people who might have preferences that fall outside of the culture that already exists. So we can ask interview questions. In the workshop on Friday, we'll go over some of those interview questions. And if you want to follow up with me, I'm happy to send them to you. It's not a secret. It's just we don't have enough time. So you can ask interview questions. You can assess for this in work tasks. You can ask for examples of how people are motivated on their cover letter, and like what makes you tick, what lights your soul on fire, those sorts of things. But we want to make sure that we're adding people to the team that have a chance of being motivated in your setting. And that's number one. Number two goes along with this is that we need to create a universal, clear, thorough, and equitable onboarding process that defines expectations and accountability for people. One of the big motivator challenges in workplaces is that we're often failing from the very, very beginning. So people come on, they go through either a disjointed or not so thorough or totally random onboarding process with lots of different people, but they still don't actually understand what is expected of them and how they're going to be held accountable. This is one of the number one demotivators that we see. I don't know what my role is. I don't understand how my role fits into the larger organization. I don't understand how my boss is holding me accountable, or how my performance is being reviewed. I don't feel valued. I don't know how to feel valued here. And so we need to make sure that at every step of a person's job, at the very beginning and throughout, we are being clear and thorough so that everybody knows what's expected of them and how they're accountable at all times. And then we stick to it. We're not changing it 7 times over the course of the year. Number 3 is that we need to build relationships and get to know our employees for who they are and not just for what they do. So when people feel like you only know them for their job, for their role, for their responsibilities, it is very common for people to feel like you don't actually see them, you don't actually value them, you don't even know them. Right? I hear this all the time. They don't know me. They don't take the time to get to know me. When people don't feel like they are known, they are less likely to show up with a high level of motivation. So building relationships is really, really critical. Number 4 is that we need to show appreciation and make sure that staff know that they are valued for real. So just like people are motivated by different things, people have different gratitude languages. People want to feel valued in different ways. Sometimes people want to be recognized publicly or in a Slack channel. Sometimes people don't want that at all, and they want it to be private, and they want their boss to just say, you did a really great job on this project. Catering our approach is incredibly important here, because if we do not show appreciation in the appreciation language of the person, that can actually demotivate people. We might do it to motivate people, but we need to demotivate people. So we need to show appreciation and make sure that staff know that they're valued for real and in the ways that they want to be valued. Number 5 is that we need to create strong communication strategies. Communication is one of the number one things that people come to me with when they're talking about culture challenges. We don't know how to communicate, or we don't communicate well, or things are misunderstood, or they're lost in translation. As leaders, as managers, we need to really focus on this and pay attention to clarity, to accuracy, to timeliness, to timing, to preferences, to tone. And part of communication is listening. So it's not just about the words that we're sharing, it's also about how we absorb other people's messages, whether those are verbal messages or written messages. People need to feel heard. And so when we are communicating, again, clarity, accuracy, timeliness, timing, preferences, and tone, if we don't meet people's preferences, they might be demotivated. If we are completely wrong about the timing of an email that we send, or someone's really emotional at the moment where we try to offer feedback, or you send something at 5 p.m. on a Friday, those are all examples of how timing might be demotivating. Also, potentially interrupting someone's vacation time or their weekend. Communication needs to be well defined, and hopefully that can be something that's embodied by your full workplace. Number 6 is that motivation requires predictability and routine. If things are ambiguous all of the time, or there's constant change, or we are constantly shifting rules or expectations, that is severely demotivating for people. We need to make sure, to the best of our ability, right? A lot of us work in really ambiguous circumstances where we're beholden to clients or other stakeholders or board members. And sometimes we can't predict anything, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, we could never have predicted that it wouldn't have been a 2-month thing, right? We're over 2 years in at this point. So there are pieces that can't always be predictable, but if we can maximize predictability and routine where we can, we're working towards building the conditions for motivation. Number 7 is that we need to consider people's end goals and provide opportunities to incorporate education goals and interest into their jobs. So if you know that somebody aspires to take your job someday, yes, there might be lots of ego attached to that. There might be feelings. You might not think that they're ready. And as a manager, we want to actually consider that as an end goal and teach them and show them the steps to be able to take your or somebody else's job, or to be able to move to another organization. A lot of times people don't want to talk about the long-term goals, but it's like, well, if I help them get there, then they're going to leave. Chances are they're going to leave anyway, right? Millennials and Gen Zers are not staying in jobs for more than 2.5 years, except in very rare circumstances. And we need to plan for that. And so if we want people to be as motivated as possible in the time that we have them, we need to let them know that we know their goals and provide active opportunities to help them reach those goals, even if that means that someday they will leave us. We're getting to the end here. My voice is getting tired. Number 8 is that we need to provide learning and development opportunities that are relevant no matter where employees land. I think I actually just incorporated this into number 7, but learning and development opportunities can include training, it can include coaching, it can include check-in time with you. But again, it doesn't matter if they leave. I know it hurts. We don't want to lose good people. And if you can create an environment where people are motivated and because of really rich learning and development opportunities, then for the time that they're there, then that is worth it. It is worth it, even if they wind up leaving someday. Number 9 is really critical. So we want to make pathways to growth and promotion clear and transparent and help people get there, even if not with you. So this is something that a lot of organizations are working really hard on right now. It's something that if you want to talk more about, I am happy to talk more about with you. We have not traditionally been very good at creating career ladders, creating career pathways, at making next steps really transparent for folks and having equitable processes attached to that. And so this is a learning area where we need to pay attention. When somebody comes on, they're likely going to ask, what are the opportunities to grow here? And we want there to be a really clear answer to that, right? Like, we expect people to be promoted within 2 years. We expect people to be able to move to the next position with us within 18 months, whatever it is. It might be 3 years, it might be 5 years, but knowing what those growth and promotion criteria are, allow people to be tied to it. And number 10, again, this is a teaser for the rest of the workshop, is that we need to maximize our and other people's influence. And again, influence is everything that we do that impacts other people. So tune in on Friday, or we can talk about bringing this to your team if that's something of interest to you. I saw some things light up in the chat here, and one of them was really long. So I'm just going to pause here for a really quick second to read and answer the question that's already here before closing us out. So in the chat, somebody said, I think that people are often expected to work late in nonprofits on behalf of the cause as the sole motivation, which isn't fair. And my caveat here is, no, it is absolutely not fair. It drives me nuts that we rely on good staff, goodwill, work extra hours on behalf of clients and the cause, but relying on this eventually causes people to burn out if it is the only motivator, and it is disrespectful of staff members' time and effort. Yes, so this isn't actually a question, but it is something I want to affirm. Rallying for the cause and making your people into martyrs only works for a limited amount of time. If you are in the nonprofit sector, you are likely in it because you care deeply about the mission of your organization. And nonprofits have been built on the backs of human beings who are willing to work 60, 70 hours a week, and relying on them being motivated to do that because of the cause. And that is not okay. About 50% of Reloveution's work is with nonprofits, and we spend a lot of time on this. That no cause, we're not in the business of trading people's well-being and their health for any cause, right? That doesn't help any cause if we are burning ourselves out in the process. And that's about creating functional systems as well as impacting or creating changes in our own practice. So that brings us full circle on the me talking at you portion of today. I want to thank you all so much for being here and invite people who are tuning in live to stay back to ask questions or provide reactions or to engage in discussion. But I am going to close out the recording in just a second. Just a reminder that if you are interested in the full workshop on motivating and influencing human beings, you can join us on July 22nd. We're going to be meeting from 12 to 2, so obviously a much longer period of time than this. And that's Eastern time, and you can feel free to join us. And we also bring this workshop to teams, to groups, to employee resource groups, to full organizations. And so if that's something that is of interest to you, please reach out. I'm really grateful and humbled to be doing this work alongside all of you. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.